Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Today I'm going to talk about the subject of artistic interpretation and how there can legitimately be differing interpretations of a work. So, when it comes to interpreting artistic works, what this refers to in a broad sense is looking at the artistic work, the structure of it, what is the relationship between the things within the artistic work. To make things simpler, I'm going to take a story. There are many kinds, there are paintings and statues and other such things, but I'm going to take a story, like a novel, because, I write novels, so I kind of like them a lot. All right, so within that, you look at a novel, you look at the characters within it, and the characters do things, they say things, they think things, and so on. Things happen to them, and they react to these things. All of these things are relationships that happen between the characters and their environment, and so on. And these things, there are two properties that are relevant to artistic interpretation. The first of these properties is that what happens is underspecified. It is underdetermined. That is to say, what you are told does not tell you everything about what actually happens within the story and how it goes. And so there will be things that matter about what happens in the story that you simply aren't told. To give a really trivial example, you have the question of reliability. When somebody says that they did something or said that this is why they did something, were they actually telling the truth? And of course, then there's the further question that falls within that of were they, if they were telling the truth, then okay. If they were not telling the truth, were they lying or were they simply mistaken? And so these are things that you may well not be told within the story as you read it. And so the interpretation consists of filling in these things that you are not told within this story, in order to establish what the relationships between things really are. And then the second thing about interpretation is that these things then can relate to reality. And so to take a really simple example, you have, the two basic good stories are the Celebration of Virtue and the Lament of Vice. And so in the Celebration of Virtue, take just a conventional story of the sort that are often, for children, wherein you have somebody is faced with a tough choice and then they make the right choice and they, possibly go through some form of self-sacrifice, they do something heroic, and then they're happy because they did it. This is a celebration of vice, and this actually does correspond to something real in the world. This is a celebration of virtue. And when you act virtuously, this does in fact lead to happiness. That's real. That's an actual real facet of the world. And therefore, this artistic work is corresponding to reality. There is something that you can learn from it. And now, I don't mean, I'm describing this in an abstract way, but I don't mean that the things that you learn are in fact abstract. The whole point, actually, of it being an artistic work is that it's not just the words, being virtuous leads to happiness. It's something wherein the characters and their actions actually have this structure within the work, and therefore having that structure within the work, it teaches you about this structure of reality, but in the complexity that you can't fit into words. Especially words if you were to say them in a complete monotone, as in my previous example. So, these two things together are how you can legitimately have different artistic interpretations of artistic works that are valid. Because in an interpretation being valid, what I mean by that is that this actually does correspond to reality. So, when you put this together with the previous thing about how all artistic works are always underspecified, what happens is that in an artistic work, you can come up with interpretations, that is to say, you can supply the things that were not specified within a work that fill in the relationships that exist, that are depicted in part within that work. And then by filling them in, and filling out that structure, if that structure, as filled out in the way you did it, corresponds to reality and also does not contradict the story itself, then, well, you have an interpretation whereby you are learning something real about the world, and therefore this is a valid thing to do because you are learning something true about real life. And the caveat that I gave is that it does have to not actually contradict the work. So you can't take, say you have a bad work, which is a celebration of vice, where somebody is vicious, that is to say they do bad things and then are completely happy about it. You can't take this and form an interpretation wherein they didn't actually do the things that you're told that they do, and they instead did good things instead of what you were actually told in the work. That's not a valid interpretation because you're contradicting what was actually there. The thing that you do when you create the artistic interpretation does have to be filling in things that are not present in a way that is consonant with the things. You can't actually create a coherent set of relationships that can then correspond to the world if the things that you put in are dissonant, or contradict the things that actually are present. Reality is actually coherent, and so when you fill things in, it has to be in a way that coheres in order for it to work. But so to I'm thinking about, do I really want to get into, I want to keep this video a little bit on the shorter side. So I'm going to switch over to songs because it takes a lot longer to explain about the plots of books. Take the song Somebody That I Used to Know. There are different possible interpretations you can take of what's going on because it is completely unspecified within the song who, if anybody, has said true statements of what has gone on. For those who haven't seen the song, really, really briefly, the basic thing is that they both agree. The two singers, the two characters, were in a romantic relationship at some time in the past, and then this romantic relationship ended. According to him, she said that they could still be friends, but then she completely erased him from her life. According to her, he promised that he wouldn't be hung up on her, but he broke that promise and was. And so he was outside of the bounds of friendship and was trying to keep the thing romantic. So it is not specified if either of these two people is in fact telling the truth. And they both blame the other one. Now, my preferred interpretation of the song is that they're both telling the truth. That he is telling the truth that she said they could still be friends and then just erased him from her life. And she's also telling the truth that he was, as she put it, he promised he wouldn't be hung up on somebody that you used to know. That he was, in fact, hung up on her in this way and wouldn't let things go and wouldn't simply be friends with her. And so there's an interesting... I've got an entire video about this. It's a really good song. I really recommend it. It's got a fascinating music video as well. But so that's one interpretation, where they're both telling the truth, and this says things... I really go into this interpretation a bunch in my video, but this says things about the breakdown of human relationship and the way in which people tend to have myopic perspectives, where they don't see very far past the end of their own nose, to use that metaphor. But you can take other interpretations of the song which give you other things. I think they're not as interesting about real life, but you can still get things that do correspond to real life. For example, you can take the perspective that he's telling the truth and that she is lying in a sort of self-defensive way. You can, wherein this corresponds to things where you, one version in which you have one person who's acting reasonably well and another person who isn't, and who is just being profoundly selfish and not very honest. You can take the flip interpretation as well, of where she's telling the truth and he isn't, where his version is leaving out all of the things that he did wrong, and that so she was not in fact breaking her word because he broke the promise that her word was based upon, and so he has nothing to complain about, whereas she does. And again, that sort of thing does happen in real life. This corresponds to something real. This is a real relationship. The relationship as depicted within the artistic work is true to reality. You will find that thing as well. Neither of those, I think, are as interesting as where the two of them are both telling the truth. But at the same time, all three of these are valid interpretations, because all three of these you can fill in details that are not present in the song. The song is underspecified in the sense. You can fill in these details and you then come up with something that is consonant with the song and moreover corresponds to something in reality and teaches you something true about reality. And again, in a fuller sense than just, somebody reciting an abstraction about it. And so that's an example of how you can have multiple artistic interpretations, and they are all valid in the sense of none of these interpretations contradict what was there. And equally importantly, none of these things are false to reality either, and therefore all of these interpretations are useful for learning about reality. And that's really what I mean when I say that there are valid interpretations, that these things are both consonant with the artistic work itself and consonant with reality, and as such, they do what art is there to actually do. Art is there to disclose what is real. Art is a something fake, something false, whose purpose is to disclose that which is real. In that sense, it's a little bit like a lens. Like when you look through a lens, what you are seeing is not what's right in front of you. You're seeing something distorted from that, but distorted in a very particular way that communicates things that are in front of you that you would not be able to perceive without this distortion. And so, though a distortion, it is a distortion that is true to what's in front of you. Think like a magnifying glass, which is a lens, where you can't see everything that's on the other side of that lens, but you can see a little bit of it much bigger and can perceive things you would not otherwise perceive. There is a falsity, but it is a falsity in service of disclosing the truth, and the falsity is not a misleading falsity. It is a falsity only in the sense of it is incomplete. And so artistic works are like that. They are not the thing, but they represent the thing, and so they act kind of like that lens. Like there isn't the fullness of there being something real there, but nonetheless it does give you something that is real. That's the purpose of art, is to disclose that. And just as a detail, art is supposed to be beautiful, but truth and beauty are the same thing, just considered differently, or in the very sort of dry scholastic term that truth and beauty are convertible. But in any event, truth is beauty and beauty is truth, just sort of considered in a little bit of a different way. So when I say that the purpose of art is to disclose the truth, I am saying that the purpose of art is to be beautiful. I'm just elaborating on it a bit. So that's how you can have multiple interpretations of an artistic work that are all valid. Until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.